Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Hey there, and welcome to You've Been Selected. I'm your host, Kate Vitella, and something tells me you didn't just stumble across this podcast by accident. Maybe, just maybe, you've been called here, like selected by the universe for something more. So let's get started. Welcome back to part 2 of Kate's story. If you made it through the first part, congratulations, that was a lot. So I wanted to pick up where I left off, but somewhere in my mid-30s. And I'm telling my story in kind of a Cliff Notes high-level version. So as this podcast goes on, you have an understanding of where I'm coming from. Of course, I'm going to elaborate on some of these. And I have so many good stories. I can't wait. So welcome back for part 2. So I'm picking up in about 2016. I believe it was after my DUI. I was still drinking pretty heavy, well, very heavy, knowing I needed to quit drinking, but I didn't know how. And I remarried my now husband, Philip, who I bet you're thinking, who would marry someone in that condition? But that's another episode. He spent 20 years in the Army and was just getting out, and we were a codependent nightmare. So there's an episode coming of our debauchery. But also remember, alcoholics, I was a master liar, master manipulator. So he was codependent, and it all just worked for us to get married and be super messy in the beginning. But it was early in our marriage, in the first year, around 2016, 2017, and the drinking was so incredibly bad. And my friends were nurses, and they recommended that I start smoking pot because, pot is just, so much better for you than drinking, and there's no hangover, and you'll feel so much better the next day. I'm a 35-year-old, 36-year-old woman at this time. I don't think I had ever even tried it. And it was legal in the state of Washington. So I started smoking pot because at this time I could not fathom total sobriety. I just couldn't fathom it. It was like, well, if I have to give up drinking, then what's my next crutch? Like, what, should I just switch to heroin or pot or food? Should I become a sex worker? Like, the thought of going totally clean and sober was so foreign to me. It was like, who lives their life like that? Who lives a sober life and doesn't numb out in some capacity? Like, it's just not going to happen. So, of course, I started smoking a ton of pot, which for nurses, because it's not federally legal, this was an ultimate taboo. So I took a job in home health, and I was so proud of myself, you guys, because I had gone 6 months without drinking alcohol. I was working in home health, driving to go see clients in their homes and do like some routine wound care and checkups after surgery and such. But in my head, I was like, I beat this alcohol thing. No alcohol for me. Like, look at me doing this, basically white knuckling my way through the 6 months and smoking a ton of pot. So I was not sober. I was just ripped out of my head with a whole nother problem. And when I was working in this job, one day I was on my way to go see a patient or client, and someone rear-ended me. So I had to fill out an incident report for work because I was on the clock. And they said, "Oh, that's fine. Just come in, provide a urine sample, and we'll do the incident report for an on-the-job accident." And I panicked because I knew that I would test positive for weed, which isn't even that big of a deal. But to me at the time, it was like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I was so proud of myself for not drinking alcohol. So I had this awesome idea to go to one of those smoke shops and buy fake pee. And I was just going to, tuck it into my scrubs and then go and pour it into the cup because they wanted to collect the UA right there at the place I worked. I didn't have to go into an actual lab. Well, I go in to this facility that I work at. They go to collect the urine sample. Here I am, like so coy with my fake pee, like stuffed into my scrubs. And when I went to pour it into the specimen cup, I dropped it and it rolled underneath the bathroom stall, like out into the lobby area of the bathroom where the person collecting the specimen was standing right there. And it literally rolled right to her feet. And she was like, "What is this?" And I just came out of the bathroom just bawling and, of course, confessing all, saying, "It's fake urine, and I smoked weed, and I was afraid I was gonna get in trouble." Just told her everything. Well, they fired me on the spot and escorted me literally to the curb. Of course, I had no car because it had just been, like, mangled in this accident. So my new husband, Philip, had to come and get me, and here I am, fired from another job. My substance use issues still no better than they were, it was just more of the same, right? More of the same debauchery. Except this time I had really done it because I knew in the back of my mind it was more than just getting fired from my job. I knew they were going to report me to the State Board of Nursing. And they did. But that takes some time before the Nursing Commission responds to those charges. So after getting fired, I just kind of avoided my life for a little while. I didn't look for work as a nurse. And I went out to my parents' property and helped them on the property to make some extra cash. But really, I was just avoiding reality. I didn't even want to check the mail because I knew what was coming. And I knew nobody else would hire me. I had burned every bridge in this community. And of course, I went right back to drinking and smoking pot, and I was taking Prozac at the time. So it just becomes this mess of substances, right? I'm taking a messy amount of Prozac because there were days I would just forget to take it because I'm drunk. And then there were days I'd take 3, 4. And then there were days I would take it with my glass of wine, bottle of wine, box of wine. There were days I was eating edibles, drinking wine. I mean, just a mess, a mess. But ultimately, what ended up happening was my mental health just absolutely spiraled. And this isn't really a nursing term, but I had a mental breakdown. I mean, I was staying out at my mom's beach house because my husband and I were no longer getting along. He had actually asked me to leave the house. My new husband, by the way, we were newlyweds. We'd been together for a year. He was like, "This wife is a hot mess. Why did I marry her?" But yeah, so I'm out at my parents' beach house, and my behavior is so bizarre that I'm doing things like I'm wandering around the beach alone, not properly dressed, drinking heavy, acting completely bizarre in front of my mom. Now I know this in retrospect, but I ended up being taken into the local hospital in the beach community. And after a alcohol poisoning and a whole bunch of other substances I had thrown into my body, and I was unresponsive for a couple of days. And they took me from that small beach community hospital up into the big city of Seattle to an involuntary psychiatric ward where I was detained, locked in for 10 days where I paced the halls in spice-colored scrubs because I was determined to be a danger to self and gravely disabled, which I now know are the terms we use when someone is not functioning on their own capacity on the outside. And of course, I was angry and confused, and I didn't really understand why I was there. And I didn't remember specifically telling anyone I wanted to kill myself, but I was a mess. And the bizarre doses of Prozac I had been taking, missing it for a few days, then taking it again, I mean, it really screwed up my brain chemistry. So my husband and my mom had me stay there for 10 days and before they would let me come home. And really, one of the only memories I have from that time is sitting in the windowsill of this hospital room. And the only book I had access to was the Bible, of course. Like, I was in prison. And I read the whole book of Proverbs because I used to be one of those girls that had that quote, Proverbs 31:30, basically saying a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Like, stuff is nothing, material things are nothing. It's all about your relationship with God. And I was in the window of that hospital room. It was a cold window, and I sat there in those spice-colored scrubs, and I was in the window of that hospital room reading the Bible. And I thought, all I have right now is God. That's it. That's all I have. I am down to nothing and no one, and gripping onto that Bible was literally all I had. And I can look back and see that, like, my angels were watching over me at that time. I had these lucid moments of spiritual connection, even in the darkest hour when my brain was literally scrambled. And I mean, for no better words, I was crazy. I mean, I was locked in a psychiatric facility, and I would lay in bed with this cheap felt blanket at night, curled into like the fetal position because I was scared. And people were pacing the halls screaming. There was lots of fights and all kinds of things going on in that facility because people were very sick. They were very mentally ill. So that was a scary time for me. And my husband and I were basically separated, nearing divorce. We hadn't filled out the paperwork simply because I didn't have a checking account or a driver's license. But I spent that entire summer after that at my mom's beach house, kind of wandering around. And, again, I can look back. And during that time, I was at the psychiatric facility. A letter had come in the mail from the nursing commission, and they had finally processed all my charges, and my license was in jeopardy. I was to go before the council and try to save my nursing license. And basically, they charged me with a crime of moral turpitude, which was like premeditated murder. It was like I plotted out this rotten, unmoral behavior. And in my mind, I was sure it was over for me because I just didn't see a way out of any of this. So when I got home from the summer at the beach, I took a job at Macy's because I needed money so bad. And this was around the holiday time. Here I am, a registered nurse with a bachelor's degree. I've been an RN for 17, 18 years at this time. I'm making minimum wage at this local little janky Macy's in my hometown, listening to Christmas music because it's the holiday rush, and I'm selling bras. And every doctor I knew from the local hospital walked in and asked, "Oh, hi, Kate, what are you doing here?" And I would sit in my car on this old BMW on my breaks, and I would sit in the dark in the wintertime. I was, like, eating tuna casserole, literally staring at the sky, like, numb. I was in disbelief. I was in disbelief that this was my life. I had this BMW that looked pretty on the outside, and it was literally on its, like, last 50 miles before it was going to blow up and completely die. I called her Sailor. She was navy blue. She was very pretty. She would smoke and malfunction, and I knew any minute she was gonna break down and leave me walking on the side of the road. It's like shiny on the outside, almost dead on the inside. If I ever had a band and that was my album, that'd probably be the album cover. Anyway, those were some dark times, and I daydreamed about driving Sailor off a cliff because I wanted my life to be over. And finally, my husband took me into the local Army hospital emergency room and had me declare that I was having these ongoing suicidal thoughts, and had me sit down with a provider and say, yes, I want to take my life. I'm hopeless. And of course, they, pulled out the suicide prevention, you know, protocol and gave me a list of providers and immediately sent me to a nurse practitioner in my community. I just circled a random name on the list and I was like, another therapist that can't help me, that doesn't know what I'm talking about, that doesn't understand addiction, and is probably going to be super annoying. And I'm going to leave feeling worse than before. So I went into this appointment with this nurse practitioner, and I can say her name is Jeanette Rivet because she saved my life. She's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, a name I circled on a random list. And my mom went with me to the appointment, and I had no makeup on. I was disheveled and just broken. And she lugged me into the lobby, and we sat down and filled out the paperwork while I waited for yet another provider to come out and be like, oh, I can't help you. Anyway, so out walks this lady named Jeanette to call me back into her office. And my mom jumps up in the lobby, screams, runs over, hugs her, and cries. And it was a woman that had basically helped raise me since I was little, one of my mom's long-standing, lifelong friends. She had a different last name, and she had gone on to pursue advanced education, and her and my mom had lost touch. So my mom didn't recognize her name on the piece of paper. And when they reconnected and realized, it's just little Katie sitting here with my mom and Jeanette from the old days, they went back behind closed doors, and I heard crying and laughing and yelling and all these things. And my mom and Jeanette came out and got me, and I knew that something was about to shift for me. I just knew that was the ultimate God shot. Things like that just don't happen to people. You don't just stumble into an office of someone you haven't seen for 20 years that changed your diapers and is there to talk to you about why you want to take your life. The whole time my mom is just in tears beside herself, saying, thank God it's you, Jeanette. Thank God it's you. Okay, I'm getting chills, and I'm going to try not to tear up here because I'm just remembering this. But Jeanette basically hooked me up with an attorney who knows how to handle these things when nurses get into these situations. She gave me hope that I could, tell my story someday, maybe help other people. She gave me hope that I could get sober, that I could get my medication stabilized and, work on my depression, and that I could enter a monitoring program for nurses with these substance issues. And there was a chance for me to save my license. And all of that slowly fell into place. And that is where I got enrolled into a monitoring program. This attorney that I hired squashed my case in 2 weeks and said, yep, you're good to go. You just need to go through this monitoring program. What you did was stupid, but it's not the end of the world. And there I entered the monitoring program for healthcare professionals with substance use issues. And that's when I downloaded the app on my phone because I needed to check in every weekday to see if it was my day to provide a random UA, because they would pull me from working the minute that I tested positive for anything. I mean, a poppy seed muffin, too much Tylenol, you name it. So I was being heavily watched, and I needed to attend weekly meetings with a group of nurses who were also in my shoes. And this time really changed my life. And of course, that's where the name from the podcast comes, is some days I'd check the app and big red letters, all caps, you've been selected today. And I thought, I've been selected. So I'd go to work, and I would tell my boss, I got selected. I got to go UA, because I was able to get back to work. I was able to go back to work as a nurse because I opted into this monitoring program. And I had never worked in mental health before, but I went into an involuntary psychiatric facility right down the road from my house that was similar to the one I had been admitted to. And I said, I'm going to be totally honest. I'm 6 months sober. This is what I just went through. I'm in a monitoring program for nurses. I don't have any experience in psych except for I was just a patient in a facility. So I have lived experience, and the hiring manager gave me a chance and hired me. And I started back as a nurse for the first time in a few years. I hadn't had a job. And those years I'll never forget of being in that monitoring program and rebuilding my career literally one day at a time. And I remember thinking, I don't know the most about psychiatric nursing. I don't know more than a lot of these nurses who've been in this field for a long time. I don't know the psych meds. I don't really know how to talk to people in this environment. They're locked in. I don't know all the lingo, the acronyms, but I know how to show up. And I will never miss a day of work. And I will give them a dime for their nickel, as they say in AA. And I did. I did. So, of course, there was a lot more humbling moments that came as I, navigated this return to work. Like I had said in the episode 1, my years of bulimia had completely rotted my teeth. So during this time, I also had to have 4 teeth pulled. And they were like obvious teeth. They weren't teeth in the back. They were like the obvious ones in the front that you can see. I had to have them pulled and go through the whole process of building an implant. And there were some times I was toothless, not gonna lie. I was toothless, working in a psych ward, and feeling so incredibly grateful that I even had a second chance. So grateful. And I started even joking back then about one day I'm gonna have a podcast or I'm gonna write a book and it's gonna be called You've Been Selected. And my friends in the monitoring program, we all laughed about that because we thought, well, that's a great idea. And I did end up eventually writing a blog for the Sober Curator. And I wrote an article on this particular memory, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. So I have this one memory of sitting in the parking lot of one of the labs where I needed to go provide a UA. Of course, I'm looking at my phone, looking at the app. It says the big bright red letters, "You've been selected." And I needed to keep those letters in front of me so that I could write down the corresponding number and code that came with it, because that went on the form I filled out for the UA. So I'm staring at this app on my phone, and I go reach for my commuter mug, and there's a Yeti sitting there in the cup holder full of milk. Because during that time, every time I had been selected, I was told that drinking milk helps provide a lot of protein and liquid. So you can get a pretty good sample and it's not going to be too diluted and it all just works out really well. So here I am drinking milk from a Yeti, and I had a sticker on the Yeti cup that said "Sober Gangster" that I had bought off of one of these Instagram sites. And I thought, damn, that is me for sure. I'm a sober gangster by this point. I got the milk and the Yeti. I'm at the lab. I've been to hell and back. And I just remember sitting there, like, again, staring at the sky, thinking, God, I don't know if this is some kind of sick joke, but this is my life. And I've been selected, and I'm just going to make the best of it. But deep down, I knew that this whole nightmare journey, it had a bigger purpose for me. I just knew. I had this gut feeling that there was no way that all of this happened, that me getting admitted to the psych ward, the suicide attempts, stumbling across a childhood friend who helped save me, all of it, getting sober, getting to this far, getting selected, drinking the milk, the sober gangster sticker. I mean, it was like I could just see everything coming together. And I kept clinging on to the feeling and the hope that this was all for something greater. And I really feel like the universe was kind of nudging me at this time, saying, oh, yeah, you're here for a reason. You just got to keep going. And I'm sorry, but there is nothing more gangster than working at a psych ward, running in to randomly UA, dealing with the friggin' humiliation, telling all the other nurses, oh yeah, I'm in one of those monitoring programs because I used fake pee and dropped it, and I'm an alcoholic. I mean, the levels of humility that I went through during this time, I used to joke that, like, it wasn't like a piece of humble pie, it was the whole motherfucking pie. I just ate the whole pie every day. And I hate milk, by the way. I do not drink milk ever. So, yeah, if anyone deserves a sober gangster sticker, it's me. So, you know, and I really didn't put it together until I think recently, as close as 2023, I attended a nursing conference for nursing leaders for the state of Washington. Because here I've worked my way up to director of nursing, regional nursing manager, high levels within the company in psychiatric nursing. And I've been board certified as a mental health and addiction nurse. I've really studied and put the time and the work in to grow my career in this field. And I think I had just gotten out of the monitoring program at this time. So I was really curious to go and see what was on the nursing board agenda or discussions, future nurses coming into the program. And so I took a couple days off work and I went to this convention on my own just to, I don't know, maybe I had this like weird, deep, morbid feeling that I just needed to be there because I had finally graduated the monitoring program. But something pulled me to that conference. And when I sat down, it all came to me. One of the main topics of the conference was nurse suicide. And there was a correlation that they had studied between nurses being notified that they were in trouble with the state board and that they were facing losing their license and them completing suicide. They had articles, they had a speaker, they had stories of nurses who had been notified. And before they even did anything to rectify the problem, they were caught maybe taking narcotics out of the medication room. They were caught drunk at work. They were facing losing their license. And instead of even going to their loved ones or one person before they even went to their significant other and told them that they had been notified, they took their own life. And I'm sitting there in that room listening to these stories, and these people are talking about nurses suiciding because the jig is up. They've finally been caught. They're going to be in massive trouble. Their entire livelihood is going to be taken from them. Everybody's going to know. And I just remember chills running up and down my arms thinking, my story wasn't just a cautionary tale for nurses. It wasn't just one of those rock bottom to redemption stories. It was part of a bigger issue. And I spoke up at that conference and said, when you're notified by the state that you're in trouble, it becomes public knowledge. That information goes out to everyone on the mailing list for the Washington Health Department or whatever state your health department is in. So your crime, what you did, all of it. And I can completely understand why people, especially nurses and healthcare people in that state, you're trapped in addiction. You have a problem. It's helpless and hopeless. You're scared to death. You can't stop drinking or drugging or whatever you're doing that's inappropriate. And you're maybe stealing pills from work to avoid going into withdrawal, something terrible. And then you go and you risk losing your license and the humiliation. And I just thought, I don't ever want to see another nurse take their life before they even try to get out on the other side. And not just nurses, human beings in general. I've come across so many people who have had to face the reckoning of, the jig is up. Everyone knows now you have a horrible problem. You did something horrible. You wrecked your car. You put your kids in jeopardy. You put your marriage, whatever, your career, you crossed that arbitrary line in the sand. But I want you to know you do not have to give up right now. There is a chance you can turn this around if you fight. And I realized I had this gift of empowering others through what is hopefully the worst days of your life. Because let me tell you something about going through hell. You got to go through. There's no way out but through. But you come out on the other side unfuckwithable. I had lost everything. My credit score was like 10. Is that a credit score? My husband and I were divorcing. I was kicked out of my house. My nursing license was in jeopardy. I was missing teeth. I had no car. I had tried to take my own life. You name it. And I came out on the other side crawling one day at a time. So my story kind of wraps up in that way, that I worked to study addiction. I worked to learn everything I could about addiction science. Is it a disease? Is it hereditary? What's the best way we can treat people? I learned about harm reduction. Do I have to call myself an alcoholic forever? What are people teaching other people about addiction? What's the science? What's going on in the brain? I learned everything. I read every book I could possibly read. I became a certified addiction nurse, yada, 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 yada. And I never thought I would actually become a coach. But the words "you've been selected" have become my mantra. Like, you went through this for a reason. The universe brought you straight up to your fucking edge, and you didn't back down. One of my favorite authors, Dr. Wayne Dyer, he says, there are no accidents. And I realized it was time for me to start a more purpose-driven life. What if I had been selected for a more purpose-driven life? What can I give back through storytelling, through building hope and inspiration and coaching? So in the coming episodes, I hope I can deliver every bit of that: the storytelling, the resilience, the redemption, the hope. And I want to be a friend in your ear because I know what it's like to hit rock bottom. So I will answer every question that you can possibly throw at me. Let's take a deep breath together because this is a lot. It's a lot of information. And again, this is the cliff notes of my dumpster fire. And I can talk about this because, like they say, I'm speaking from a scar, not a wound. I'm sitting here now recording this in my cozy house, in my cloffice, my room that's painted the way I like with all my fashion stuff. It's my closet office. I got my clothes, my jewelry, my perfume. Life is really good. I've got money in the bank. I've been sober almost 7 years now. I am happily married to Philip, my husband, who went through all that with me. So I can talk about these things now. But it was one really slow, messy day at a time. And I know that everyone loves a comeback story, but it's just not that cliche. It did not happen overnight. It took years of slow forward motion. And every podcast, every book, every influencer, every speaking gig I went to, I learned something a little bit more. I was inspired a little bit more, and I was prompted forward to go a little bit farther. I slowly paid off my debt. My credit score is decent now. It's not perfect. My life isn't perfect, but I graduated the monitoring program. I built back my nursing credibility with my teeth, rebuilt my marriage. And I've learned that life really happens one freaking day at a time. Like, I don't think I'll ever in a million years go back to drinking, but there's really no way I can ignore that all of this happened one freaking day at a time. And I want you to share this episode with someone who needs to hear all this, who needs to know that recovery is possible, or maybe someone that's just in the dumpster fire right now. Let them know they've been selected too. You can rewrite your story. I did it, and I'm not closer to God and the angels than you are. I am no more special than any of you. Addiction is the great human equalizer. It affects everyone. We're all human beings, and I got through it. So I would really encourage you to share this with someone who you think it would help, who it would resonate with, because I crawled through the other side and I am here now. But rest assured, I will never forget. And I know that I've been selected by the universe for a bigger purpose. And I am here speaking these words to you right now, hoping that at least one person hears this and finds a little bit of strength, a little bit of hope to move forward. This sounds like a Disney commercial. It sounds very sappy, but I can tell you, talking about some of the hardest days of my life, I mean, I think I'm a sober gangster, but this kind of stuff, man, it still brings me chills. These were some tough, tough days. So thanks for listening. You made it through 2 brutal long episodes about Kate.com, and I hope moving forward we have a lot more pleasant things to talk about. Thanks for tuning in. You can find me on my website at katevitella.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Kate Vitella. I would love to hear from you. Any feedback or questions, shoot me a note. So until next time, peace within and bullshit out.